Welcome to Light Data Action, the podcast that's on a mission to help you discover new technology trends and tools and better understand how they affect the world around us. I'm your host, Terry Barbounis, and in each episode, I'll speak with industry executives and thought leaders to discuss how these technologies change the way we do business and how you can stay ahead of the innovation. If you're ready, let's join the conversation. Hey everybody, I'm Terry Barbounis, Director of Innovation Strategy for Lumen's Product Innovation Team. I'm also the host of Lumen's external thought leadership podcast, Light Data Action. This week, we're taking the show on the road. We're in San Francisco at the 2023 Game Developer Conference, and today we're going to talk about protecting the gaming experience. How does cybersecurity play a role in this innovative, dynamic industry? Joining me today, I have an illustrious panel. I have Craig Matusz from Lumen Cybersecurity and Advisory Services. I have Peter Quinttus from Spearhead Consulting. I have Lavi from Wallarm, and I have Phil Abbenante, again from Cybersecurity from Lumen. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining me. So when you think about cybersecurity, and we think about the gaming industry, is it different? Or is it the same types of considerations that we often see in other industries? I'll start with you, Peter.
Yeah, I think a lot of the same challenges that your typical enterprise, small business, mid-market client faces, because we got two sides of gaming, right? You've got the corporate infrastructure side, offices, employees, et cetera, the global footprint, but also, and equally as important, if not more important, is the end user experience. So the gamer, your teenager Friday night wants their game to work, wants things to work, smoothly and effectively. So making sure that uptime is available there is critical, for their brand and, for the success of the game overall.
Right. Adi, same question to you.
Thank you. I would say that it is similar. First of all, games have to be online. So DDoS risk is very prevalent among games. I would say protecting PII and accounts, customer accounts, is very, very important. And lastly, I would say that in the last few years, everything is going APIs. So protecting the game's API is very, very important. A lot of the data goes through those APIs, and if you're not protecting those APIs, that could impact the company, the bottom line, customer data, and so forth.
Bill?
One additional comment is that the difference between gaming and some of the others is that with denial of service mitigation, it's run always on. It's run 24/7. It's not on demand. They have to have it in place while, before the game starts and during the game. Otherwise, it will ruin the game experience because of the attacks that can come, not just from the outside, but from the inside, from the players themselves. And that is unique in that industry.
Right.
So we have a global infrastructure that helps protect that experience with layer 3 and layer 4 volumetric attacks, plus the layer 7 API attacks that we partner with Wallarm on.
So, and I forgot to mention this earlier. Actually, you can go if you want. Peter, can you talk a little bit about what Spearhead does? And then Adi, can you do the same with Wallarm so that the audience knows
Sure.
you guys play in the space?
Yeah, so Spearhead Consulting, we've been a long-time Lumen partner, so I think this would be our 13th year in the Lumen Partner Program. So in our role, our job as really a consultant and broker of Lumen services, right, is to understand the customer base intimately, right? We need to sit in their strategic meetings, understand their challenges, understand their problems, and really help be that interface into Lumen, alongside the sales team. So, a lot of times, when a customer interfaces with a vendor like Lumen or an ISP overall, they might be thinking, kind of one-track minded. Like historically, I've done business in this manner with that vendor. Our role is to intimately understand everything Lumen has to offer, right, and make sure that our customer is educated and that their experience within Lumen as a vendor goes off without a hitch, right? Grease the skids, for lack of a better term, right? We're there to make sure that they have a positive experience overall, navigating a large company like Lumen.
Sure. And Adi, what about Wallarm?
Sure. So we are an API and application security company. We've been around for several years now, and we help our customers protect their availability, via layer 7 DDoS. We help them protect their web applications via a WAP. We also help protect their APIs via an API security, as well as bot management. So whatever the customer needs around application security, we can help them protect those applications, whether they are external or internal via microservices.
Phil?
One additional comment about our partner Wallarm is that they will actually, free of charge, run an API leak report against a customer's website to show if they have any vulnerabilities, so that we can approach them in that manner and say, you might have an issue and we'd like to get together with you and talk about it with our partner. So that's a big difference versus what some of our other partners bring to the table in that regard.
Yeah, and you mentioned DDoS. I was going to ask you, Craig, as part of that cybersecurity advisory services within Lumen, with things like Black Lotus Labs, threat detection and so forth, what can Lumen currently do to support, obviously the gaming industry, because that's what we're talking about, but industry in general, when it comes to things like DDoS?
Absolutely. So I think it's important to understand that our DDoS, traditionally, people think about it, it's at layer 3 and layer 4. By adding Wallarm, we're looking all the way up to layer 7. But here's what's really unique about Black Lotus Labs and the Lumen legacy hierarchy, if you will, is Black Lotus Labs has been around for quite some time, and we have been on the front of all of those threats when we see them. So really what we've done is we've become a very proactive, almost automated DDoS service for our customers. We're different than what traditional DDoS services are out there today, and having that Black Lotus Labs looking at threats coming across a backbone the size of Lumen's. And when I talk about Lumen's backbone, it's very simple. We have about 660 POPs globally. We see about 80% of the world's internet traffic, even if it's just for 1 second. In doing so, that gives a lab the ability to grab that information, even in that second, and do something or warn someone about it.
Right.
And that makes us different, especially around DDoS.
Yeah. Peter and Adi, you guys can decide who answers this question first. Do you see a difference between security as it relates to the individual user and security of the infrastructure, the console, and sort of the connective tissue, those services that are connected via API, as being more or less detrimental? Do you see more of one or the other, or are they both equal?
Yeah, I would say they're connected. They cannot go one without the other. That's why we partnered with Lumen, right? That they have this like vast infrastructure always on with the protection built in. If you protect your user data and the infrastructure doesn't work, I mean, it's still, it's like the surgery was successful, but the patient died, right? You need both of them. So that's why we decided to partner with Lumen. Lumen provide the always-on infrastructure, including the security built in with Black Lotus, and we supplement where Lumen needs additional capabilities, especially around those APIs.
And then, Phil, from a Lumen perspective, when you talk to customers, especially within gaming, is there a distinction of where you see kind of the gravitational pull in any one particular area that there's real concern around?
No, it's very similar, and all of it's been mentioned. The big thing with gaming these days is that there's a lot of money in it.
Right.
It's being monetized. Esports is huge, and the awards to these player teams are larger than they have ever been. Further, you have to subscribe to that game, so now there's individual streams of revenue that comes with PII data. So as a result, each of these gaming companies has to have a programmatical approach to vulnerability scanning, remediation, patching, updating that is very difficult to do because of the nature of their business. The games are always on. So when is there a maintenance window to fix these things? That is a very difficult thing for them to do, and where they need help, and that's where we come in.
Yeah. How about from a gaming development perspective? Do we see issues, vulnerabilities in the code itself that requires better hygiene? I mean, we've certainly seen it in other industries where there's development applications and things like that. Craig, is that something that you talk to customers about when it comes to code itself being the issue?
Well, if you think about it that way, as well, if we're going to peel back the onion, right? I mean, it's important to understand, even in development of a product, and whether it's gaming or any other vertical that we look at, we're talking about brand protection, but more importantly, could there be a vulnerability in or a bug released? Absolutely. If you think about access and who touches things, and most everything is pushed either out to the cloud or is set somewhere on a server. Access is easy, right? So what we want to do is we want to protect those things that are inside that access point. So if it's DDoS, what a lot of folks would get lost on is the fact that we think that it protects a pipe. Yeah. It doesn't protect a pipe. It protects the applications inside that pipe. And I think that's where this team, especially when we bring best of breed partners like a Wallarm, Spearhead, we're out to protect the customer's brand. If that's a developer, so be it. But look around at all these logos here. They're all a brand, and they need to be protected. And in doing so, look for us from a partner perspective. That's what we do. We protect people's brands. And I think most importantly, Phil mentioned was it's about uptime. If your game is not up and working, I'm moving on to something else.
Yeah.
And that's really where we play. And that's our strong suit.
Yeah. Peter?
Yeah. So just, a comment and maybe a little bit of a different interpretation on the question. So, in telling a story, this was probably, I'm sure a lot of people here have played Half-Life 2 and were super excited when that game came out. Well, that was the first time, at least in my life, there was a newsworthy event to where source code leaked, right? There was a database leak, right? Someone was inside the network, probably an employee. I don't remember the whole story and exactly what happened, but the source code leaked to a point where the game could be compiled and released online, right? So months before the game's released, there was essentially a version that wasn't fully complete that was available to the public, which, to your point, major brand damage, right? So, and this is kind of where we talked about the blend between the customer-facing experience and trust around that, and then the damage, the punitive damages to the actual company financially. So, two different ways to protect it, right? We talked about DDoS on the way in and the way that the application is distributed, but also now within the company itself, right? Protecting that database, crown jewels, quite literally, right? They're proprietary information here. Okay, so how do we keep a log of that? How do we identify who's touching what at any given time? How's identity, being named, and how are we making sure that users remain within their, appropriate lanes, and if not, a group's alerted appropriately. So it all builds, like we've talked about, security and layers, right? So starting out on the internet, with DDoS, looking at the WAP, looking at the firewall at the edge between the APIs, and then there's the tools inside the network, right, that Lumen is an expert in, and building that entire portfolio, monitoring it for the customer, providing that end user experience that, at the end of the day results in, like we said, our kids on a Friday night being able to play a game without complaining that the servers are down or that their credentials were compromised, right?
One other comment. In terms of the gaming users, it's when you think of gaming, you might think of kids, right? It's not. It's multi-generational, from young people to older people in their retirement years, 60s, 70s, even 80s. So this is a huge following, and that's why it's so important to protect it, because there's so much at risk, and the personal information that's there. It's like stealing a medical record. It's got that type of information, or having your credit card or your social security number taken from you. It's that important. So that's why it has to be a defense in depth with them and a multi-pronged approach in order to protect the environment, because of really what's at risk. It's never been more valuable than it is today.
Can I add one more thing?
Sure.
So let's take it now from like a CISO perspective, or a CEO of a company, and not even talk products, if you will. What about governance from a footprint or posture perspective? So that cybersecurity posture that a company has is going to envelop the things that we talk about here, but it's also going to talk about patching, risk assessments, vulnerability assessments, right? Pen testing. Remember, everyone's out to get in, if you will, and cause trouble. And whether it's on purpose or whether it's by pure accident, it happens. And so I think it's also important for a developer or any gaming company to have a great compliance or GRC program, which is governance, risk, and compliance.
Yeah, and it seems to me that these technologies that are certainly being leveraged within the gaming industry, things like AI, metaverse, and so forth, are also opening up sort of new frontiers, new threat vectors that we didn't have to consider before. Here's the example. There was recently a study done with the largest group of gaming data. 50,000 users, 2.5 million recordings of people playing various games. Now, according to NIST, fingerprints and fingerprinting equipment needs to meet the threshold of only one error within 100,000 scans. When they tested that equipment, it's more like 1 in 15,000. So not as accurate in terms of identifying somebody. When they looked at the gaming data, somebody actually swinging a virtual saber in that environment, if you look at the base data for movements, head and hands, they can tell more accurately than a fingerprint the player in this game, in this game, in this game is the same player. But what can you do to protect that? You can't obfuscate that data because it's necessary for the game, right? And so it seems to me that we're uncovering new areas that we have to figure out how to protect, because that's a privacy anonymity sort of thing. How do you guys, Avi, how do you look at that? Because obviously there's APIs at play there for one, but that's the type of data that to me we've never had to contend with in the same way as protecting other types of data.
Yeah. The challenge with security, I think, that is unfortunately a little bit lagging, right? There's like all these technologies and use cases that coming about, and what you're just mentioning now is very, very interesting. If you'll be able to pin back to a certain user, that is definitely an issue with privacy, and we'll see how long it will take the industry to combat it. But it's definitely challenging, especially if you talk about underage, right? We talked a little bit about gaming with underage kids. In the cybersecurity space, we're talking about IPs, right, and PII data. If now you can trace back users based on the behavioral patterns in the game, I mean, that's definitely a new challenge that the industry will have to address, for sure.
Yeah.
One other comment. The bad actors out there have a distinct advantage, which is why the security lacks. They can purchase all the equipment and all the software, and they can reverse engineer it. That's why they have an advantage, and that's why we're always in a catch-up mode, Terry, is because of that very fact. So it makes it very, very challenging. And when we use new vectors of saying, well, this is your identity, it's your thumbprint, or it's your retina scan, those help with that identity, but those things can be faked. We've all watched Mission Impossible and watched them do some of these sci-fi things, but the reality is that stuff can be faked. And those who have the capability do that type of thing and make our world a whole lot difficult to live in.
Right. Peter, do you have a perspective on that?
Well, I mean, we kind of just talked about it actually with another vendor really close to us over here that was here to optimize gaming, low latency, stable gaming by using an algorithm and an API to basically identify where's the closest server based on the makeup of the group, so that it's essentially an equal experience across the board for those multiplayers. But the way the data is gathered with geolocation and fingerprints, although might not identify them directly, but you have enough micro bits of information and you can trace that back to someone. Yeah, I mean it could be a major challenge, but that just further emphasizes the importance in a multi-vendor world, right? None of these companies are acting by themselves, right? They're enabled by other partners and other innovators and other tools that help their end customer reach them on the web. It's that trust factor, right? It's trust but verify, I guess, is the right terminology. But putting something like a web application firewall in place or inspecting those APIs that you're exchanging with vendors are going to be hypercritical, to ensure privacy and safety in the future. Now and in the future.
Right. I wonder if with all of this technology, monetization is top of mind. If you look at what happened since GPT 4.0, the whole chat GPT, everybody's now racing to monetize it. Meta decided to move away from creating metaverse to doing AI. Craig, with Black Lotus Labs, you mentioned, Lumen sees 80% of the traffic around the world. We're sort of sitting, we took, the world's largest IP data network and turned it into the world's greatest sensor. We see a lot of things. Do you ever fear, and this is a broader question, but I'll start with you. Do you ever fear that because of the speed to monetize some of this, because of the speed to get to market, that we will end up falling behind from a security perspective, even with the technologies to be able to help mitigate that, because monetization goes first and foremost, we'll build security technical debt where it's not until there's another major hack or a breach that somebody says, oh, we should have thought of that, and go back to the drawing board.
Yeah, I think we fear it, but I think we live it. I mean, we're here because of what you just said. Right. Cybersecurity 15 years ago wasn't even a term, right?
Yeah.
And bad guys existed. We came into existence to try to catch the bad guys. Do we catch the bad guys? I think that's a question for the ages. Right. Do I fear that we'll always see this race, and it's getting faster and faster? Technology is faster and faster. So therefore, I think we have to turn it up, and we will have to become developers of the next gen cybersecurity forces, whether it's technology, whether it's intellectual property. We have to get there. I think Black Lotus Labs using scientists is a leg up for us.
Right.
And then we just have to continue to find scientists who can keep up with what we're faced with. Sure.
Here's another thing. Code costs you money if it is not in production. So when it's in production, you're able to monetize it.
Right.
You talked about the speed to getting it out there, Terry.
Right.
That's part of what's driving this. Plus, we also have a DevSecOps environment that they're working in with containerization that allows that code to get put out there faster. So those website changes, those game changes, on the application can be done much faster and then put out there. Oftentimes they don't think about the regressive effect of that code and don't test it because of such pressure to release it. We're talking about, how many times are you releasing code per day or per week versus per month or year? So that's really what is driving a lot of this. And we have to get better at that.
Yeah. Lavi?
Yeah, if I may, I definitely agree. The rate of innovation increases. We can see here when you're walking down the floor, you see user experience, you see design, you see different games. Nobody talks out here about security, right? I mean, but it has to be built in. No, I don't see security being advertised. That's exactly the issue. But I accept it and I understand, right? I mean, you have security conferences. This is about games, but you have to always remember about security. We talked about code testing. So definitely in cybersecurity, we call it shift left. You want to be able to scan your code before it goes into production. It's way more expensive to fix code in production. So just make sure that you scan the code before you go in production. We see the developers here. They're not security people. That's okay. Nobody can be everything, right? They're good at what they're doing. Make sure that you have the right tools before you deploy into production.
Awesome. Peter? All right. So you look out 3 to 5 years. Craig, what do you kind of hope to see from a security perspective, certainly within gaming, but in industry in general? If there's a couple of big bets that you want to make in terms of things that you go, that's fundamental in how we move forward, what would you like to see, you think?
I think one is if we could offer a subscription service to every gaming developer or gaming company where they just are buying security as a service from someone. Right. Sure, would we want it to be us? Absolutely. But I think subscription services for security is important. But if that's where I want to be, or if that's where I think we should be, yes. But then if you think about just turning on a game, when we log on to a computer, we enter passwords, so on. In a game, you log a password. Would I want to know that if I log into a game that it's safe from end to end, and that my PII is safe, and so on and so forth? Then yeah, that's a perfect world, right? But I think by adopting cyber principles, to Adi's point, developers are developers. Go ahead and engage a cybersecurity expert to help you build those cyber features in or a part of that posture/program. I think that's a better world for everybody.
Yeah. Peter?
Yeah, and it's actually gonna, my comment's gonna kind of build off of a lot of the conversations we've had today, and this zero trust mindset, which obviously is a big topic that we don't have time to get into today, but those same principles could be passed to the user, an individual consumer. It sort of does today, but can do so in a more meaningful way, where you as a consumer with your fingerprint and your identity, not literally, but like your web fingerprint and identity, can be tied to the appropriate applications and sectors within those applications, right? That you should, buy what you've subscribed to, buy what you've purchased, buy what you've signed up for, have access to. And, by really isolating that down to the, matching user to app appropriately, I mean, you filter out the noise. And with the way ZTNA and, Zero Trust in general is architected, it could, it could help out a lot in the future for these types of incidents that we've talked about.
Yeah, awesome. Lavi?
All right, I'm going to take it to a different angle. I think it's about education, right? When I look at my grandmother, right, and internet, and she doesn't know what a password is, while I know, it basically means that I've been educated. So if we have education courses in school or in college, right, and we are being better users, I think that will help a lot. I also have seen this data that says that 90% of breaches are actually happening because known vulnerabilities, right? Things that are already known. So if we fix the things that we know that are broken, I think we'll take care of the majority of the issues.
Yeah.
Well, certainly social engineering has a big part of what he was just describing, and it's alive and well. And so security awareness for the end user is very important. But to touch on, your question, where is it going? I like where Craig was going with the subscription base. We have to have an easy button. So where before they release code, they rinse it through the security tool or something that checks for errors, bugs, whatever, and make sure that, yep, it's okay, release it. That's what's going to happen more and more. And we're doing a lot of that with making it easier to subscribe to our services, some of our security services, compute storage, WAF services, all of that via our marketplace to make it easier, and then integrating it with others.
Yeah.
So you have to integrate it with the other things that they are consuming. That's really the easy button and where it's going because of how fast things are progressing and the pressure on to release it and get it out there and monetize it and get your ROI for everything you put in. Again, code costs you money unless it's in production. End of story.
That's awesome. Well, panelists, thank you very much. It's good to see that the gaming industry is not any different than other industry in terms of security. I'm certainly glad that individuals like yourself, obviously Lumen, talks about this and tries to act on it all the time. You guys within your respective companies do the same. We'll have to reconvene at some point and see if any of those big bets pay off. Thank you again, panelists, Craig, Peter, Avi, Phil. Thank you very much. For those of you that are watching, we've got a lot more coming up over this next week. More topics, more panelists. Stay tuned.